Welcome to Life Stories, where we share powerful, real-life tales of love, loss, and resilience. In today's story, we dive into the life of a woman who, after losing her husband, faces an unexpected battle for everything they built together. With her mother-in-law's manipulative schemes and a shocking twist that no one saw coming, she learns what it truly means to stand up for herself and fight for what's right. Get ready for a journey of emotional highs, tough decisions, and a love that transcends even death. Subscribe now to begin today's story. I never imagined my life would turn into something like this. If you had told me years ago that I would find myself sitting in a lawyer's office, clutching my hands together in grief, facing the woman who had made my life a living hell, I would have laughed in disbelief. But here I was, staring at Rebecca across the polished oak table, my heart heavy with sorrow and a strange sense of calm. Michael, my husband, had passed away 6 months ago. It wasn't a sudden shock. He had been battling a long illness, one that gradually took the light from his eyes, the joy from his smile. But I still wasn't ready for him to be gone. I still wasn't ready to face the world without him by my side. We had spent 10 beautiful years together, building a life full of love, laughter, and shared dreams. We had created a home, a safe place where we could forget the troubles of the world. And yet, in the shadow of that love, there had always been one constant: Rebecca, his mother. From the very first day I met her, I could tell Rebecca didn't like me. In fact, she made it painfully clear that she didn't think I was good enough for her son. She'd make cutting remarks about me, always suggesting that I was after his money, even though Michael and I had worked hard for everything we had. But I knew what it really was. Rebecca didn't want to lose control of him. She had always been a force of nature, manipulative and cruel, never willing to let go of her hold on Michael. In the years we were together, I never stood in the way of their relationship. I never wanted to come between mother and son, no matter how much it hurt to watch Rebecca tear him down with every sharp word she spoke. Michael spent years trying to earn her approval, trying to prove that he was worthy of her love. He wanted to believe that deep down, she loved him the way a mother should. But the truth was, Rebecca's love came only when he obeyed her every command. The moment Michael married me, she saw it as a betrayal, as if he had chosen me over her. And in some twisted way, she couldn't bear it. But no matter how much she tried to drive a wedge between us, Michael still loved her. He never stopped hoping that one day, she would see that I wasn't his enemy. And I never stopped comforting him. Never stopped trying to remind him that he was enough. That he was worthy of love, even if Rebecca could never give it to him in the way he deserved. Then, 6 months ago, Michael passed away. The days leading up to his death were filled with so much pain. But also, strangely, a sense of clarity. We had time to talk about everything: his illness, his fears, his regrets. And in those last few weeks, he made one thing very clear: he wanted to make sure I was protected. He knew his mother. He knew she would fight me for everything. Rebecca had always been about control, and he wasn't about to let her do the same thing to me that she had done to him. I wasn't surprised when I received the call from the lawyer's office that day. The reading of Michael's will. I knew it was coming. But that didn't make it any easier. I arrived at the office, my hands trembling, my mind still reeling from the loss. Rebecca was already there, sitting across from me in her black dress, her face an unreadable mask. She gave me a look that was both condescending and triumphant, as if she were already expecting to inherit everything. I could feel her eyes on me as I sat down, and I couldn't help but wonder if she thought I would give up without a fight. But I wasn't there to give up. I was there to honor Michael's wishes, no matter what Rebecca tried to take from me. The lawyer began reading Michael's will, his voice steady and calm. To my beloved wife, Emily, I leave our home, our savings, and all of my personal assets. Rebecca's smirk faltered, just for a second, but she quickly recovered, leaning back in her chair with a smug air of superiority. She was sure the money, the investments, the stocks, everything she thought was rightfully hers, was coming her way. I could see it in her eyes. The anticipation, the expectation. But the lawyer continued, his voice clear. To my mother, Rebecca, I leave. He paused then, pulling out another piece of paper. His lips twitched, as if he were trying to suppress a smile. Rebecca's brow furrowed, her expression suddenly changing as she reached for the paper. The lawyer slid it across the table to her. "Daniel left you a letter." Rebecca's hands were trembling as she unfolded the letter, her eyes scanning the words. And as she read, I watched the color drain from her face. The smirk was gone, replaced by something else, something I can only describe as pure rage. Her hands clenched the letter so tightly I thought it might tear in her grasp. Her lips moved silently as she read the words. And then, she slammed the paper down onto the table. "This is a joke," she hissed. My heart was pounding in my chest. What did it say? What had Michael written? I leaned forward, desperate to know. The lawyer, his face calm, looked directly at Rebecca and said, "Daniel wanted to make sure his final words to you were clear." Rebecca's face had turned red with fury, but I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of relief. Because what I read next was not just a message, it was the final act of defiance. Michael had protected me, even from beyond the grave. The letter said, "Mother, if you are reading this, it means you are probably expecting to take everything from my wife. But I need you to understand something. You have never controlled me. And you will not control her. You spent my entire life trying to manipulate me, trying to make me feel like I was never good enough. But in my final moments, I found peace knowing that I had built a life with someone who truly loved me, not for my money. Not for what I could give her, but for me. You never gave me that love. And because of that, I owe you nothing. Everything I have goes to my wife, the woman who stood by me when you never did." I had to stop reading for a moment. Tears filled my eyes, but not from sadness. It wasn't grief I was feeling. It was pride. Michael had seen through her. And in the end, he had chosen me. Even though he was gone, he was still protecting me. Rebecca's face contorted with fury. She shoved the letter away from her. "This is absurd," she spat. "He didn't mean this. He was sick. He didn't know what he was saying." The lawyer, ever calm, sighed and said, "Mrs. Caldwell, I can assure you, your son was of sound mind when he wrote this. And as per his wishes, you have not been left with anything." The room fell into silence. I could feel the weight of Rebecca's hatred in the air. But I wasn't afraid anymore. Michael had won, even in death. Rebecca's eyes were blazing with rage. "This isn't over," she screamed, her voice trembling with fury. "I'll fight this. I'll take you to court. That house should be mine. That money should be mine." The lawyer's response was as cool as ever. "You're welcome to contest the will. But I'll warn you, Daniel took extra precautions to ensure that it was ironclad. You'll be wasting your time and money." Rebecca glared at me, her eyes filled with venom, before storming out of the office, slamming the door behind her. I sat there for a long time, staring at the empty space she had just occupied. And for the first time in a long while, I allowed myself to breathe. It felt strange, sitting there in the lawyer's office, as if I were suspended between two worlds. The past, the years I had spent with Michael, full of love and struggle, joy and sorrow, and the present, the uncertain reality I had to face alone. The weight of the will, the final words Michael had left for me, pressed heavily on my chest. But beneath it all, there was something else, a sense of freedom. Michael had chosen me, he had left me everything. And with it, he had ensured that Rebecca's control over him, over us, was finally severed. As I walked out of the office, the cool air of the autumn morning hit my skin, sharp and refreshing. For the first time in a long while, I allowed myself to breathe deeply. The world didn't seem so heavy, so full of burdens. The fight was not over. Rebecca would never give up. And I knew that her wrath would follow me in the months to come. But something inside me shifted. I wasn't the same person I had been when Michael had passed. The grief still lived inside me, gnawing at my heart every day. But now there was space for something new, a sense of strength I hadn't known I had. The days following the reading of the will were a blur of paperwork, legal battles, and constant reminders of Rebecca's fury. She didn't take Michael's final decision lightly. She launched every possible legal challenge, throwing accusations of coercion, of manipulation, even suggesting that Michael wasn't in his right mind when he wrote the will. But it wasn't working. The courts were on my side. And the more Rebecca fought, the more isolated she became. Still, I could feel her presence in the corners of my life. She was always there, a shadow I couldn't escape. She called constantly, left nasty messages, sent letters threatening to expose me, to ruin my reputation. But each time she did, I stood a little taller, a little stronger. Michael's love still enveloped me, even in his absence, and the knowledge that he had chosen me, trusted me, had given me the courage to stand my ground. I spent the next few weeks sorting through our things, Michael's clothes, his books, the things that once filled our home with memories of a life well lived. I was careful not to erase the past, but also determined not to let it suffocate me. Every item I touched, every photograph I came across, was a reminder of what we had shared, but also of what I needed to leave behind. One evening, after a particularly long day of going through old letters and photos, I sat down in our living room, exhausted. The house felt empty without Michael, the silence pressing in on me like a weight I couldn't shake. But then I looked out the window, at the garden we had built together, the flowers he had planted, the tree we had grown from a sapling, the swing we used to sit on while watching the sunset. It was still beautiful, still full of life, and in that moment, I realized that this house wasn't just a place of memories. It was also a place of new beginnings. I decided to start fresh. It wasn't easy. I was still grieving, still lost in the hole of loneliness Michael had left behind. But I couldn't let that define me. I couldn't let his death be the end of my story. I had to live, for both of us. Over the next few months, I began to make changes. I cleaned out rooms, redecorated, painted the walls a soft blue, the color Michael had always loved. I started taking long walks in the mornings, something we used to do together. I volunteered at a local shelter, something I had always wanted to do but had put off because of work and responsibilities. Slowly, piece by piece, I was rebuilding my life. One day, while volunteering, I met someone. His name was Thomas. He was quiet, kind, and had a way of making me feel heard, even when I didn't know what to say. We started talking more during our shifts, sharing stories of our past, of the things that had shaped us. He had lost someone too. His wife had passed a few years ago, and he had found solace in helping others who were grieving. His understanding of pain, of loss, was something I hadn't expected, but I appreciated it. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I wasn't alone in the world. I wasn't sure where it would go, if anything would come of it, but the warmth that grew between us, the comfort of knowing I wasn't the only one who had suffered, was enough for me. It was a small thing, but sometimes, small things were enough. Rebecca didn't stop. She continued to challenge me in court. She continued to send letters, to try and intimidate me. But each time, I stood firm. I had Michael's love in my heart, his words in my ear, and I knew that no matter what happened, I was stronger than she would ever give me credit for. I was free. There was a lesson in all of this, something I learned as I navigated the painful and difficult process of grieving and rebuilding. Love, real love, isn't about possession. It isn't about control. It's about trust, about standing by each other through the worst of times, and about knowing that even when one person is gone, the love they leave behind doesn't disappear. It changes, yes, but it never truly fades. Rebecca didn't understand that. She had spent her whole life trying to control Michael, trying to bend him to her will, and in the end, it was that very control that drove him away. But I had learned from him. I had learned to let go, to live fully, to love without fear. And as I sat there, on that quiet evening in our home, with the sun setting over the garden, I knew that I was finally starting to live again. A week had passed since the lawyer's office, and life, for the most part, had returned to a strange kind of normalcy. I was starting to find my footing again, gradually rebuilding a routine that was mine, free from Rebecca's shadow, free from the suffocating grasp of her manipulation. But that calm didn't last long. It never does with people like her. The first sign of the storm to come was subtle, almost easy to overlook. It came in the form of a phone call, a strange, blocked number that I almost didn't pick up. But something in me urged me to answer. to brace myself for whatever was coming next. When I did, it was Rebecca's voice that greeted me. "You think you've won, don't you?" she hissed, her words dripping with venom. I stayed silent. I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of hearing me react. Her voice shook with rage. But there was a bitterness to it. A coldness that made my skin crawl. "You have no idea who you're dealing with," she spat. "That house. That money. Everything that Michael worked for. It should have been mine." I let her words hang in the air, the weight of her anger pressing on me like an unbearable weight. But I refused to let it break me. Michael had made his choice. He had protected me from her even in his final moments. "Rebecca," I finally said, my voice steady, "Michael made his choice. You need to accept that." She scoffed, her laugh bitter and sharp. "We'll see about that," she muttered before slamming the phone down. I stood there, staring at the receiver, my heart pounding. I knew this wouldn't be the last time I heard from her. She wasn't the kind to take defeat lying down. But I also knew I wasn't the same woman I had been when Michael passed. I was stronger now, more resolute, and I would face whatever came next with courage. The next few days were quiet. Too quiet. The phone calls stopped. The letters ceased. At first, I was relieved. Perhaps she had backed off. Perhaps she had accepted her defeat. But then one morning, I woke up to a cold, unsettling feeling in my chest. The house was too silent. Too still. I had a sense that something was wrong. As I made my way down to the kitchen, I noticed the envelope taped to my front door. My breath caught in my throat when I saw the words written on it. "Eviction notice." I yanked it off the door, my hands shaking, and read it over and over. The words blurred as my eyes filled with disbelief. The notice claimed that the house, our house, was not legally mine. It didn't make sense. The will was ironclad. Michael had made sure of that. There had to be a mistake. I grabbed my phone and dialed the lawyer's office, my heart racing. When he picked up, his calm voice did little to ease my anxiety. "She's trying to contest the will," he explained, his voice as serious as I had ever heard it. "She's claiming that your marriage was fraudulent, that you manipulated Michael when he was ill. And now, she's saying the house should revert to her, as the closest blood relative." I felt a wave of nausea crash over me. "But she can't do this, right? The will was clear. Michael made sure of that." "She can try," he said, his voice grim. "But she doesn't have a leg to stand on. It's a baseless claim. Still, you need to prepare yourself for a fight. And it's going to get ugly." The call ended, but the unease stayed with me. I couldn't shake the feeling that Rebecca wasn't done with me, that she would stop at nothing to get what she thought was rightfully hers. The next few days were filled with tense silence, broken only by the occasional phone call from the lawyer, keeping me updated on the progress of the case. But despite his assurances, I couldn't shake the feeling of impending doom. And then came the next blow. It wasn't a legal document this time, but something far more personal, something that could not be easily ignored. I came home one evening to find the front door ajar, a soft creak echoing through the house. My breath caught in my throat as I stepped inside. Slowly, cautiously, the house was dark, eerily quiet. Then, I saw it. My living room, once pristine and filled with memories of happy days, was a disaster. Furniture was overturned, photographs torn to pieces, papers scattered across the floor like remnants of a life I had once known. It wasn't just vandalism, it was a message. I stumbled back, panic surging through me. My mind raced as I dialed 911, the phone trembling in my hand. The police arrived quickly, but whoever had done this was long gone. There were no signs of forced entry, no sign that anyone had stolen anything. But everything was ruined. The police asked the usual questions. "Do you have any idea who could have done this?" they asked. I didn't have proof, not enough to point a finger directly at Rebecca. But I didn't need proof to know who was responsible. It was her. I was sure of it. Her need to control, to destroy, to make me feel small, it was all there. In every broken piece of my life. When the police left, I stood in the middle of the destruction, my hands still shaking. The house was no longer a place of comfort. It was a battlefield, and I had no idea how far Rebecca was willing to go to win. But one thing was clear, she had declared war. I wasn't sure how I was going to fight back. But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to back down. As the final blow fell, I felt the weight of everything Michael had left me, the love, the protection, the victory, come full circle. It was no longer about the house or the money. It was about standing my ground, honoring the life Michael and I had built, and ensuring that Rebecca's manipulation didn't win. With every step I took in the courtroom, every document I signed, every witness that testified, I knew I was moving closer to justice. The videos Michael had left, his meticulous planning, and his love for me became the very foundation of the defense. Rebecca, with all her lies, couldn't shake the truth. When the trial ended, when the verdict was read, and when Rebecca was finally held accountable for her years of deceit, I stood tall, unbroken. She had lost, and though it had been a long, exhausting fight, I had won, not just the house, not just the money, but the peace of knowing that Michael's love for me had been stronger than her manipulation. As I closed the door on that chapter, I felt an overwhelming sense of freedom. The future was mine to shape, and I would do so with honor, courage, and love. Michael's memory would forever be my guide, and no one, not even Rebecca, could ever take that away. And if you've learned anything from this story, let it be this. Love is not about possession. It's about respect, trust, and standing by each other through the worst of times. No matter what life throws at you, don't let anyone break you. Stand firm, and in the end, you'll find the strength you never knew you had. If you want to hear more life-changing stories like this one, make sure to subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for more videos. Thank you for watching.